There is a specific kind of silence that fills a house after a lie has lived in it for too long. It is not peaceful. It is not restful. It is the silence of something rotting underneath the surface. And no matter how many candles you light, no matter how clean you keep the kitchen, you can feel it. Something is wrong. You just don't know yet how wrong. My name is Claire, and for 11 years I thought I had a good life. I want to be honest with you from the beginning. I am not telling you this story so you feel sorry for me. I am telling you this story because I want you to understand something that took me a very long time to learn. The people who smile the most at dinner tables are sometimes the ones carrying the biggest secrets. And the women who look like they have everything sometimes have to lose everything before they find out who they truly are. So let me take you back. Let me take you back to the beginning. I met Daniel when I was 26 years old at a work conference in Seattle. I was a junior marketing analyst. He was a senior finance manager at a competing firm. He was tall, well-dressed, confident, the kind of man who walked into a room and immediately became its center of gravity. He smiled at me across the hotel lobby, and within 30 minutes we were sharing a table at the bar, talking like we had known each other for years. He was charming in a way that felt almost cinematic. He remembered the name of my hometown the next morning. He texted first. He called when he said he would. After so many years of men who disappeared and reappeared like smoke, Daniel felt like solid ground. We dated for 2 years. He proposed in a restaurant overlooking the water. I cried. My mother cried when I called her. My best friend Sarah squealed so loudly on the phone I had to hold it away from my ear. We got married on a Saturday in June. The photos are beautiful. I have a whole album of them on a shelf in what used to be our living room. A woman in a white dress, smiling so wide her eyes disappear. A man beside her who looks like he means every word he is about to say. We had 2 children, our daughter Lily, who is now 9 years old, and our son Noah, who is 7. We had a house in a suburb of Portland with a garden I actually tended and a kitchen Daniel said he loved coming home to. I worked part-time from home as a freelance content consultant after the kids were born. Daniel was the main earner, a senior vice president at his firm by the time our second child arrived. We were, by every visible measure, doing well. But here's the thing about visible measures. They only show you what something looks like from the outside. They don't show you the way a husband stops touching your shoulder when he walks past. They don't show you the way his phone suddenly needs a new passcode. They don't show you the long pauses before he answers simple questions, or the way he laughs a little too easily at texts he angles away from your eyes. They don't show you the cold space that grows in the middle of a bed you have shared for a decade. I noticed all of these things. I filed them away in a place I didn't want to open. And then one ordinary Tuesday morning in October, while Daniel was in the shower and his phone buzzed on the kitchen counter, I opened the file. I want to be clear. I was not snooping. I want to say that because it matters to me. I am not the kind of person who goes through a partner's phone looking for something to find. If anything, I was the kind of person who actively looked away, who made excuses, who told herself that a quiet marriage was still a stable one. That morning I was making Lily's lunch for school. Daniel's phone was on the counter right next to the bread. It buzzed once, the screen lit up, and because it was right there, right in front of me, I saw it. The notification preview was 6 words long, 6 words. Last night was everything. Miss you already. I stood there with a butter knife in my hand, and I read those 6 words 4 times. I want to tell you I felt rage in that moment. But I didn't. Not at first. The first thing I felt was a strange, hollow calm. The kind of calm you feel when a car is coming at you on the wrong side of the road, and your brain hasn't yet processed that it's real. I just stood very still. I set the butter knife down very carefully on the counter, and I stared at the name attached to that message. Melissa. I knew a Melissa. We all did. She was a colleague of Daniel's. Someone he had mentioned in passing maybe a dozen times over the last 2 years. Melissa from the office had a great idea in the meeting today. Melissa's handling the Singapore account now. Small, forgettable mentions. the kind of name that passes through your ears without leaving a mark. Daniel's shower was still running. I had maybe 4 minutes. I picked up his phone. I want you to understand that my hands were not shaking. I was operating in that cold, mechanical state that the body sometimes enters when the heart simply cannot afford to fall apart yet. I pressed the home button. It asked for his passcode. I tried our wedding date. Wrong. I tried Lily's birthday. Wrong. I tried Noah's birthday. It opened. He had used our son's birthday, our 7-year-old son's birthday, as the password to hide his affair. I will never forget that detail. Of all the things I learned that morning, that is the one that still sits with me the longest. I opened the message thread with Melissa. I will not read you every word because some things do not need to be spoken out loud. But what I saw was not a new relationship. It was not a recent slip. The messages went back 14 months. 14 months of I miss you, and I can't stop thinking about you, and I wish things were different. And one day this will all be sorted. 14 months of a parallel life that Daniel had been living while he sat across from me at the dinner table and helped Lily with her homework and kissed me on the cheek every morning before work. 14 months. Lily had been 8 when this started. Noah had just turned 6. I put the phone back on the counter exactly where it had been. I finished making the sandwich. I put it in the lunch bag. I zipped the lunch bag. I went upstairs and I woke both children for school, and I combed Lily's hair, and I tied Noah's shoes, and I drove them to school, and I waved from the car as they ran inside. And then I sat in the parking lot of their school for 45 minutes, and I did not cry. I could not cry. It was as if someone had pulled a plug inside me, and everything that might have been tears just drained somewhere deeper, somewhere I could not reach. When I drove home, Daniel was already gone. He had left me a note on the counter next to his coffee mug. It said, "Long day ahead, probably late tonight. Love you." He signed it with a small, hand-drawn heart, the way he always did. I folded that note very carefully. I put it in a drawer, and I sat down at my kitchen table, and I started thinking. Because here is the decision point that nobody warns you about. The moment after you find out. The moment when you have to decide, do you explode or do you plan? I had 2 children. I had been working part-time for 7 years. I had no idea what our finances actually looked like beyond what Daniel told me at tax time. I had no idea what I was legally entitled to. I had no idea what my life would look like if I left. I had no idea what Daniel would do if I confronted him without any protection around me. I am a strategic thinker by training. It is what I did for a living before I cut back for the children. You assess the situation, you gather information, you identify your leverage, and you act from a position of knowledge, not from a position of emotion. I did not call Daniel. I did not call a friend. I did not post anything. I did not scream into a pillow. I opened my laptop, and I started doing research. The first thing I did was call a divorce attorney. Not to file anything, not to make any decisions, just to understand. What are my rights? What does the law actually say? If I walked into a courtroom tomorrow, what would I be walking in with? Her name was Patricia Hansen. She was 61 years old, had been practicing family law for 32 years, and she had a voice like a woman who had heard every story and was no longer surprised by any of them. I sat across from her in her office on a Wednesday afternoon while the kids were in school, and Daniel thought I was grocery shopping. I told her everything. The messages, the 14 months, the children, the house, the fact that I had reduced my work to part-time specifically so our family could function, so Daniel could travel for work, so the children had a consistent parent at home. Patricia listened without interrupting. She took notes, and when I finished, she looked at me and said, "The first thing we need to do is understand the full financial picture, because right now, you don't have it." She was right. I didn't. I knew the general shape of our finances the way you know the general shape of a city you've never actually explored. I knew we had a mortgage. I knew Daniel earned well. I knew we had savings accounts and investment accounts, and that he handled the tax returns every year, and I would sign where he pointed. I had trusted that he was managing it fairly. I had trusted a lot of things. Patricia connected me with a forensic financial analyst, a woman named Diana, who worked with attorneys on exactly these kinds of cases. Her job was to find money. All of it. Money that was visible, money that was obscured, money that had been quietly moved into places that a spouse who wasn't looking would never find. I gave Diana access to every financial document I could get my hands on. Tax returns from the last 7 years, bank statements, mortgage documents, the investment account that was in both our names, Daniel's employment contracts, which I had actually kept copies of from when he signed them. He had shown them to me at the time, proud of the numbers, and I had filed them away without thinking twice. Diana worked for 3 weeks. What she found changed everything. Daniel had a salary that I knew about, substantial, and with bonuses it was even more so. But over the last 4 years, he had also been quietly directing a portion of his discretionary bonuses into a personal account I had no visibility into. Not illegal on its face, but in the context of a marriage with joint finances and a spouse who had reduced her own earning capacity to support the family, very, very relevant to any divorce proceedings. He had also, 14 months ago, right around the time those first messages with Melissa appeared, taken out a personal loan. Not a joint loan, a personal loan in his name only, for a significant sum. Diana traced it to a down payment on an apartment in the Pearl District of Portland, an apartment that was listed in the lease under the name of Melissa Carver. He had bought her an apartment, while we were still married, while our children were in their beds down the hall, while I was cutting back on client work so I could be present for our family. He was taking his bonus money and quietly funding a second life. A real one, with a lease and a key and someone waiting for him. I sat with that information for a long time. I didn't cry then either. I had moved past tears into something else entirely, something clear and cold and very, very focused. Patricia and I developed a plan, and in that plan, timing was everything. Daniel had an annual performance review coming up at his firm in 6 weeks. After his review, he would receive his largest bonus of the year. Under the terms of our marriage, any income or financial gains received while we were still legally married were considered marital assets, subject to division in a divorce settlement. If I filed before that bonus landed, I would be negotiating from a smaller number. If I waited, I would be negotiating from a significantly larger one. 6 weeks. I could live in this house for 6 more weeks. I could cook dinner and watch movies on the couch and kiss my children goodnight and be the woman I had always been, while the man across from me had no idea that the folder I was building had his entire life in it. Could I do that? I looked at my children. I thought about Lily's school, Noah's baseball team, the house they had grown up in, the life that, whatever else it had become, was still their life. Yes, I could do that. 6 weeks. Those 6 weeks were the strangest of my life. I have a theater background. I took drama all through high school and 2 years of it in college before I switched to business. I was never going to be a professional actress, but I was good. And I have never been more grateful for that training than I was during those 42 days. Every morning I woke up and played my role. The good wife, the attentive mother, the woman who had no idea her marriage was a performance her husband had been giving for 14 months. Daniel, for his part, seemed completely at ease. This was perhaps the most revealing thing of all. How comfortable he was. How unguarded. He laughed at the dinner table. He helped Noah practice his batting stance in the backyard. He told me about his work week. He complained about traffic. He was, in every surface way, the husband I had married. The husband I had believed in. It is a strange and terrible thing to realize that someone can look you in the eyes every single day and feel nothing about the lie they are carrying. I want to be careful here because I know what some of you might be thinking. Maybe I should have confronted him. Maybe I was wrong to wait. Maybe the children deserve to know sooner, or I deserve to stop performing sooner. Or maybe there is something morally complicated about the fact that I stayed in that house and played the role while I built my case. I have asked myself these questions many times. And here is where I have landed. I had 2 children. Their father had already made his choices. My job was not to protect his comfort. My job was to protect my kids. And the way I protected my kids was by making sure that when I walked into that attorney's office and filed those papers, I was walking in with everything I needed to make sure their lives were disrupted as little as possible. Was it hard? Every single day. There were moments. Moments when he would say something kind, and I would look at his face and see the man I had loved, and I would feel the grief rise in my chest like water. Not anger, just grief. Grief for the life I had believed in. Grief for the woman who had stood at that altar and meant every word. Grief for my children, who were about to have their world rearranged through no fault of their own. But I held it. I held all of it. I had lunches with Sarah, my best friend, who had known me since before Daniel, who loved me in the way that only old friends can. I told her everything. She cried more than I did. She wanted to drive to the office and tell Melissa exactly what she thought of her. I told her no. I told her we were not going to do anything that could be used against me. "You're so calm," she said one afternoon, looking at me over her coffee cup. "You're too calm. It's a little scary." "I'm not calm," I told her. "I'm strategic." She shook her head. "Claire," she said, "you are the most dangerous person I know." I didn't feel dangerous. I felt tired. I felt hollowed out. But I kept moving. Week 3, week 4. Daniel's firm announced his review was confirmed for a Friday at the end of the 5th week. Patricia and I had already prepared the filing. Diana had compiled her full report. Every document was organized. Every figure was verified. Every piece of evidence was secured. I had done one other thing during those 6 weeks, quietly, with Patricia's guidance. I had reached out to Daniel's HR department, not about the affair, but about the apartment, about the loan, about the financial movements that, when viewed from an employment perspective, raised some questions about how certain discretionary funds had been classified and directed. Patricia had advised that depending on how Daniel's firm viewed its own policies around financial conduct and dual life arrangements, there might be additional implications beyond our divorce. I am not a vindictive person. I want to say that clearly. I did not make that call to destroy Daniel. I made it because I needed every legitimate piece of my case to be in order, and that was a legitimate piece. The Friday of his review arrived. He came home that evening smiling. "Good news," he said, setting his bag down in the hallway. "Best review I've ever had. Bonus is going to be significant this year." I smiled back at him. "That's wonderful," I said. "Dinner's almost ready." He sat down at our table, and he told me about his day. He was in a good mood, the best I had seen in weeks. He even reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I squeezed back. That was Friday. On Monday morning, after the children left for school, I called Patricia. "File it," I said. Daniel was at the office when the papers were served. Patricia had a process server deliver them at 10:47 on a Monday morning. I know the exact time because Patricia texted me when it was done. I was sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of tea that had gone cold, and when my phone buzzed, I read those 3 words. Papers are served, and something in my chest released, like a breath I had been holding for 42 days. Daniel called me 11 minutes later. I let it ring. He called again, and again. I sat and watched my phone light up his name, the name I had once saved with a small heart emoji, the name I had changed, quietly, 2 weeks earlier, to just Daniel, and I let it ring. He sent a text. It said, "Claire, what is this? Call me right now." I did not call him right now. He came home at noon. I was still at the kitchen table. I had made myself a fresh cup of tea because I had decided that when this moment arrived, I would be composed. I would be sitting. I would be warm and clear and entirely in control. He came through the door and he looked at me, and I could see the shock on his face. But underneath the shock, something else. Calculation. He was already figuring out his response, already managing the situation. "Claire," he said. His voice was low, carefully controlled. What is going on? What is all of this? Sit down, Daniel, I said. He sat across from me. He set the papers on the table between us. He had the expression of a man who believes that if he is calm enough, reasonable enough, controlled enough, the situation can still be managed. He had probably managed many situations that way. I think we need to talk, he said, before anything becomes official, before we involve attorneys. I think you and I need to sit down as adults. Patricia Hansen is my attorney, I said. You'll want to get one too, but I'm happy to tell you what you're looking at. Something shifted in his face. I opened the folder on the table in front of me. And I will tell you, the folder is not a metaphor. It was a real, physical folder, pale blue, with a small tab I had labeled simply File, because it made me feel, in some small way, like I was in control of the story I was about to tell. I told him I knew about Melissa. I watched his face. He didn't deny it, which told me that on some level, he was relieved to stop pretending. Or maybe he had decided that denial wasn't his best strategy. Either way, he went quiet. I told him about the apartment, the lease, the loan, Diana's financial report, which had traced 4 years of rerouted funds with documentation attached. I watched the calculation on his face slow down, and then stop. How long have you known? He asked. Long enough, I said. He looked at the folder, at the neat, organized stack of papers inside it. Something crossed his face that I can only describe as a kind of slow, terrible reckoning. The moment when a person realizes that the walls they believed were solid are, in fact, not there. Claire, he said, and his voice had changed. The control was gone. I am so sorry. I made terrible mistakes, and I know that, and I need you to. I don't need anything from you right now, I said. I kept my voice even, quiet. Patricia's office will be in touch with whatever attorney you retain. That's the process from here. He reached across the table. Can we talk about the kids? Can we at least... The children are my first priority, I said. They always have been. That's not going to change. He sat back. And then I said the thing I had been holding for 42 days. Daniel, I said, I want you to know that I am not doing this out of anger. I'm doing this because you made choices that I did not know about, that affected our family in ways I did not consent to, and that have financial and legal implications that I have a right to address. This is not about revenge. This is about my children and my future. I closed the folder. I stood up. I picked up my tea. I'd like you to stay somewhere else tonight, I said. The children get home at 3:15. I'd prefer they not see you leave. I think you should be gone before then. He stared at me for a long moment. Who are you? He said quietly. Not mean, just genuinely stunned. I'm the woman who made your lunches and raised your children and built a life with you, I said. I'm just the version of her that you didn't see coming. I walked out of the kitchen. I heard him sit there for a while, and then I heard him go upstairs, and then I heard him come back down with a bag, and then I heard the front door close. I stood at the kitchen window and watched his car pull out of the driveway. I drank my tea. Daniel retained an attorney within 48 hours. His name was Frank Alderman, a man known, according to Patricia, for aggressive tactics and stall strategies. He was expensive, and he was good. But Patricia was better. The discovery phase of our divorce proceedings lasted several months. Diana's financial report was central to everything. The apartment, the rerouted funds, the timeline, 14 months of a parallel financial commitment running alongside our joint marital finances. Daniel's side pushed back hard on the apartment. Their position was that it was a personal investment, that Melissa's name on the lease was administrative, that it did not represent a personal expenditure in the legal sense. Frank Alderman was very smooth about it, very reasonable sounding. Diana was smoother. She had everything documented, every transfer, every date, every correlation between the messages I had seen on his phone, which Patricia had properly subpoenaed, so they were admissible, and the financial movements that accompanied them. There was also the matter of my own reduced earning capacity. This is something that does not get talked about enough. When one partner in a marriage scales back their career, takes part-time work, steps back from advancement, restructures their professional life to support the family, they absorb a real and measurable financial cost. Lost promotions, lost client relationships, lost compounding career growth. Diana quantified what my full-time equivalent earning trajectory would have looked like over the 7 years I had worked part-time compared to what I actually earned. The number was significant. Daniel's firm, for its part, opened an internal review after Patricia's letter landed with their HR department. I do not know the full details of what happened there. It was not my case to watch. But within 3 months of my filing, Daniel was no longer a senior vice president. He was still employed. He had not done anything technically illegal in the strict sense. But the internal review found that certain bonus allocations had been directed in ways that were inconsistent with firm policy. His role was restructured, his title changed, his income went down. I did not feel triumphant about that. I want to be honest about this. When I learned what had happened at his firm, I did not celebrate. I felt tired and a little sad. Not for Daniel, but for the waste of it, for the years of trust that had been spent on something so carelessly broken. The divorce was finalized 8 months after I filed. Here is what the settlement included. I kept the house, so the children would have stability and continuity. Daniel paid a buyout on the equity. I received a share of the investment accounts that reflected my contribution as the primary caregiver. I received spousal maintenance for 5 years. Enough time for me to rebuild my full-time practice without doing it in desperation. And child support, structured to reflect his actual income rather than the reduced version he had been hoping to present to the court. Diana's report made that impossible. You cannot rewrite the numbers when someone has already read all of them. Was it everything I deserved? I don't know. You could spend a long time arguing about what someone deserves. What I got was enough. Enough for my children to stay in their schools. Enough for me to breathe. Enough for a life that I could build on something real. The hardest thing I did through all of this was not the legal process. It was not sitting across from Daniel in that kitchen. It was not even the months of pretending. The hardest thing was the conversation I had with Lily. She was 9, old enough to understand that something had changed, old enough to notice that Daddy didn't sleep at home anymore. Old enough to ask the question that I had been dreading since the moment I saw that notification on a Tuesday morning in October. She asked me on a Sunday, about 3 weeks after Daniel had moved out. We were in the garden. She was helping me plant some winter bulbs, something we did together every year. She had her small garden gloves on, and she was being very serious about getting the spacing right. Without looking up from the dirt, she said, "Mom, is it because of something we did?" I set down my trowel. I sat back on my heels, and I looked at my daughter, this precise, thoughtful, 9-year-old girl who had inherited her grandmother's dark hair and her father's blue eyes and her own entirely original way of getting to the point, and I felt my heart completely break. "No," I said, immediately, clearly. "No, Lily, it is not because of anything you or Noah did, not even a little bit. Not even 1%. She kept her eyes on the dirt. Then why? I thought very carefully about what to say. There is a version of this conversation that makes you feel better in the moment. The version where you explain, where you assign blame, where you let your children know exactly why the world they live in has shifted. And I have known parents who had that conversation, and I have watched what it did to their children. Sometimes, I said slowly, grown-ups make choices that hurt each other. And when that happens enough times, staying together would hurt everyone more than separating. That's what's happening with me and Dad. It's about choices that grown-ups made. Not you. Never you. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Are you going to be okay?" 9 years old, asking if I was going to be okay. "Yes," I said. And for the first time since October, I felt like it was completely true. "I really am," She nodded, satisfied. She went back to her planting. Later that evening, after the kids were in bed, I sat on the back steps and looked at the garden we had planted together, and I let myself feel it. All of it. The grief, the loss, the strange relief, the love for my children that was so vast and so steady that it felt like the only thing I knew for certain was real. I cried for a long time. Not for Daniel, not for the marriage, but for the woman I had been. The one who had loved someone completely and found out too late that she had loved something he was only pretending to be. And then I wiped my face and went inside and made tomorrow's lunches and went to bed. I know what you're thinking. What about her? I'll be honest. For the first few weeks, Melissa lived in my mind as something almost mythological. The woman he had chosen. The woman who had received the version of his attention that I had been quietly missing for years. I built her into something enormous in my imagination. And then I thought, she was also lied to. This is something people don't always want to acknowledge. The woman in an affair, particularly when the affair has been going on for over a year, when an apartment has been involved, when someone has been making her feel like she is the real future, she has also been deceived. She was told a version of Daniel that was probably as curated as the one I had been given. She was told he was unhappy, that it was complicated, that things would be sorted, that one day. I do not know what Melissa knew and what she didn't know. I do not know whether she knew there were children in the bed down the hall. I choose to believe she didn't know the full picture, because the alternative, that she did, is a thought I don't find useful to carry. I never contacted her. I never wanted to. Whatever happened between her and Daniel after everything came out, that was between them. I was not interested in being part of it. I heard through mutual work connections that she had moved to a different city about 6 months after Daniel's restructuring at the firm. Whether they were still together, I do not know. I found over time that I genuinely did not care, and that not caring, the day I first noticed it, felt like progress. Real, hard-earned progress. It has been over a year since I filed those papers. The house is still mine. Our house, mine and the children's. I have painted the hallway a color I actually love, which sounds like a small thing and is not a small thing at all. I have moved the furniture in the living room 3 times until it felt right for the way we actually live, not the way we used to perform living. Lily is doing well. She is 10 now, thoughtful and funny, and increasingly opinionated about dinner options. Noah plays baseball twice a week and has very strong feelings about which cereal belongs in the house. They see their father on alternate weekends, and as far as I can tell, they are navigating it with the kind of resilience that children have that adults often underestimate. Daniel and I are civil. I want to say that clearly because it matters for them. We are civil. We do not discuss what happened. We discuss school schedules and pediatrician appointments and whether Noah needs new cleats. That is enough. That is, I have decided, exactly enough. I went back to work full-time 8 months ago. I had kept relationships with several clients from my part-time years, and I rebuilt from there. I am not back to where I would have been if I had never stepped back, but I am building, and building from something real. I have been asked, by friends and sometimes by strangers who hear pieces of this story, whether I am angry, whether I hate him, whether I feel like I won. Here is what I actually feel. I feel clear. That is the best word I have for it. Like a room that has been cleaned out properly, not emptied, just organized. Put in order, everything where it belongs. I feel proud of myself. Not for the strategy, not for the folder, not for the way I timed the filing. I feel proud of myself for the quiet Tuesday morning when I could have put the phone down and looked away and kept pretending. And I didn't. I feel proud of myself for choosing clarity over comfort, even when clarity was terrifying. I feel grateful for my children, for Patricia, for Diana, for Sarah, who never once told me to forgive him faster or heal on anyone's schedule but my own. And I feel something I did not expect to feel. I feel free. Not happy in the way I used to perform happy. Not okay in the way that means holding it together. Actually free. The kind of free that comes when you stop living inside someone else's story and start writing your own. I am 41 years old. My children are healthy. My work is growing. The garden is planted. The hallway is the right color. That is more than enough. I didn't make this video to tell you that staying quiet and planning is always the right choice. Every situation is different. Every person is different. Every marriage, every betrayal, every decision about what to do next. It is deeply personal, and I would never tell you there is one right way to navigate any of it. What I want to tell you is this. The moment you discover a lie, a real lie, a significant one, you have a choice. And the choice is not just, do I stay or do I leave? The choice is, who do I want to be in what comes next? I chose to be clear. I chose to be strategic. I chose to not be reactive, not because I wasn't in pain. I was in extraordinary pain, but because I knew that if I acted from the pain, I would only be making decisions for the version of myself that existed in the worst moment. And I deserve to make decisions from a stronger place. You deserve that too. If you are in a situation that feels like mine, if you have found something, if you are sensing something, if that hollow quiet has settled into the space between you and someone you trusted, please, before you do anything else, protect yourself. Find out what you are actually entitled to. Find someone you trust who will not make your emergency their drama. And give yourself the time and space to act from your steadiest self. You do not have to be vicious to be effective. You do not have to perform anger to be taken seriously. You do not have to be loud to win. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is sit very quietly, organize everything you know, and when the moment is right, open the file. Thank you for listening to my story. I know how long it is, and I know the ones who stayed until the end are the ones who needed to hear it. Maybe because something in it mirrors something you are living, or have lived, or are afraid of living. To those of you, you are not alone, and you are more capable than you know. If this story meant something to you, please share it with someone who might need it today. And if you want to hear more, I will be here.